It's been 2 weeks. We finally got another episode. We took Labor Day off. Today we're talking about the next transfer. You see, I got my Hawaiian shirt on. I'm ready for Maui. I'm ready for the season start. But first, let's vibe. Welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of Pirate Vibes on the Big East Energy Network. We're brought to you by Asabasa Spice. Use promo code BIGENERGY15 for 15% off your first order, Asabasa Spice. And I'm, of course, joined by my good friend. Can I say co-host now? You said I had to wait until Labor Day. It's now Labor Day. That's the reason why I took last week off. I didn't want to introduce you as a friend again.
Sounds about right after our last episode.
Okay. All right. Our co-host, Patrick Madden. How are you, man?
Brian, it's always good to speak about the team. Good to have gotten the time off because but now we're within 2 months of the start of the season, so it's time to get serious.
Oh yeah, we'll be picking up the content with 2 episodes a week right now with the women and men once a week, and then as the season goes on, we'll grow. Today, we're going to talk about another transfer. We've kind of done the transfer series with Bud Clark and Elijah Fisher. Let's talk about another one that a lot of people are talking about, AJ Staton-McCray. The kid comes over from Miami after spending 3 years at Stanford, right?
Sanford,
3 years, correct? It was 3 full years.
I believe it was, yes.
As you can see, my notes are on my computer, and I'm doing this from the phone. That's the reason why the camera looks a little. But we wanted to get an episode out to you. But he comes over. This was one of the way I looked at the transfer portal this year. You had like the early hits. Obviously, that was Bud Clark, and then you had a few late April, and then you had a couple guys in May. So like he was kind of in the middle group, correct?
Yes, He probably came in about the same grouping as TJ Simpkins and Stephon Payne.
Yeah. He comes over from Miami. Miami had a very difficult season. Obviously, they went another direction. He leaves Miami. I don't know how he has any eligibility. Did you read that anywhere? How does he have eligibility left? Because he had 3 years and then 4 years, and then is it a COVID year or is it a grad year? It just seems like he's more mature than a lot of guys that we've been getting.
Yeah, the official story as to where he was at was that he obviously played the COVID season, which is why he's got a 5th year. Then he redshirts his second season. The second season he played would have been 2021-22. Redshirts the second season. Then his sophomore season would have been 2023. Then he gets probably this is his COVID season coming up, because last season would have been his COVID season, but because he redshirted in 2021-22, he has this last year of eligibility.
Yeah, definitely. So his first 3 years at Sanford, they were pretty good. He played a pretty big role on pretty good teams, correct?
Yes. It's funny that you mentioned that the Sanford, they were coached by Bucky McMillan, who is one of the favorites of people who basically of college basketball geeks.
Yep.
A lot of people believe that basically McMillan is this savant basketball wise, a lot like Josh Schurz of St. Louis is, a little bit like Ben McCollum of Iowa is. McMillan, of course, just left Sanford. I want to make sure I get that right because Sanford is in the Southern Conference.
Yep.
Stanford, who we're unfortunately screwing up, of course, is in the ACC. But McMillan was, one of the best mid-major coaches in the country, which is why he's now at Texas A&M. Of course, Staton-McCray, after they made the NCAA tournament in what would have been his 4th season at Sanford, I guess you want to call it his junior season. He propels himself from being on that NCAA tournament team at Samford, put himself in the portal, and ended up at Miami, which then raises a question of, is there going to be a difference between how he played at Miami and how he plays at Seton Hall? Because unfortunately, what happened at Miami was that he's brought in by Jim Larinaga, of course, the guy who took Miami to the Final Four in 2023. But unfortunately, Larinaga retires right around last Christmas.
Yep.
So then, basically Miami just sunk like a rock. If anybody had a worse conference season than Seton Hall last year, it might have been Miami. And whether or not that reflects on how McCray Staton played at Miami is sort of the question. I mean, YouTube, but channel is, I think the channel, and we talked about this in the pregame, in our pre-production episode, it's a channel called College Basketball Scouting. Yep. And what they do is they produce about 4 to 5 minute videos of every major player who goes into the transfer portal, probably hundreds of these videos. So you see 2 different McCray videos when that comes up. One is the video of highlights of him playing at Samford in 2023-24, and then highlights of him playing at Miami last season. I guess the good news is that his game is his game, meaning, he's got a scorer's mentality. He likes to attack the basket. He also has a good enough stroke from 3-point range. His shooting fell off just slightly last season than it did when he was leading Samford to the NCAAs. I think he was at 40% in 2023-24 and dropped 29% in 24-25. It's interesting that if you circle back to our episode, to the Bud Clark episode, and you have to put these pieces together in order to sort of put context into what the expectations for Staton-McCray is. Sam Fetterman talked about what Bud Clark was able to do at Merrimack when he put 2 good shooters on him on the wings, and how it improved their games because the shooters that Clark played with at Merrimack were getting open shots because of the way Clark could penetrate the lane and get defenses to collapse on him, and left open the shooters from Merrimack who managed to do some damage, and that's why Merrimack was one of the best offenses in the Metro Atlantic Conference. So a guy like Staton-McCray, watching his transfer tapes, has a profile very similar in the sense that he looks to be the type of guy, if you give him open shots, he's going to knock them down, which is definitely something that Seton Hall did not have consistently enough last season. I hesitate to say that his game looks a lot like Isaiah Coleman. Now, I don't want to put him in that category, of course, because Coleman was able to put up, a double-digit season in a major conference, as opposed to McCray, who only averaged 7 points a game last year at Miami. But there were a lot of parallels between, what their mindset is when you get to the court, when you get on the court. And the question becomes, can Shaheen Holloway in this offense make McCray more effective at what he does and make him more efficient, so that, the relatively bad shooting ahead of Miami this season doesn't have such an impact on the offense at Seton Hall as it did at Miami.
Yeah, I think he is going to. I think it was tough to transfer, right? Obviously, jump from Stanford to Stanford to Miami was a big jump for him, right? And if you look at his numbers at Stanford, he continually got better while he was there, right? He saw the same type of competition and his numbers actually increased. I think he will take a step forward. I think this also losing Larinaga, it doesn't matter if it was replaced by his assistant coach, it's different, right? It's not the same guy. They're going to be saying something different. So when you basically transferred twice last year and your first time and your competition's coming up, I think he fits well with Shah. And I think it starts on the defensive side. I think he can guard a few. He can guard up. He doesn't have to just guard guards. He can get a small forward. He might be able to switch on some power forwards, and I think that helps him a lot to get on the court. And like you said, Bud Clark loves the ball. I think Sam Fetterman said that he probably led NCAAs in dribbles last year, right? Yes. So if he's just going to be a wing scorer and he can catch and shoot, which he seemed to do that at Stanford pretty well. He can work out perfectly, and you just ignore the season at Miami. That was obviously like you said it, and I didn't even think of this. If you rank the Power 5 schools that had the worst year last year, it's probably Seton Hall 1 and Miami 2. They're both in the top 5. We can argue who had the worst season all the way through, but they're both in the top 5. So I think you ignore that. And obviously, he played well at Stanford, right? And like we said, he had a lot of. They were good teams before McMillan left. Well, he left this past offseason, but they were solid teams over there. So was McMillan just getting him to the next level and be like, hey man, go challenge your next level. You got 1 or 2 years of eligibility, and he ends up in Miami, and then that situation turns into a mess, right? I feel that he is a good fit with Bud Clark, and I think his second season in a Power 5 will be better. And his numbers showed it. He's a great free throw shooter, a good free throw shooter, right? He's over 80%. So I think Tim Best complained about free throw shooting from last year still. We've been 5 months off of the season, and he's still complaining about the free throw shooting, and the team's been out of the contention for the NCAA since January.
That's sort of. You gotta put that in context a little bit, because foul shooting that's the separation between
winning and losing,
a bad team and a good team, and then maybe a good team and a very good team. So at worst, if you improve the foul shooting, and hopefully Seton Hall has done that with guys like Clark and Elijah Fisher and Jacob Dar and Staton-McCray. At least you don't walk into a game saying we're going to lose 5 to 10 points on the foul line. We may only lose, let's say, 3 to 6 points on the foul line every game, and that will put you in more games than this team was in last season. Of course, the other factor I think you have to look at with a player like Staton-McCray, a couple of things you look at here. Obviously, you go from a place like Stanford to a place like Miami because you're looking to get an NIL payday. Yeah. So the question becomes last season, which there's a parallel between Staton-McCray and Elijah Fisher in the sense that, Fisher's season at DePaul looks a lot like the season Staton-McCray just had at Miami because they had a coach get fired, Tony Stubblefield at DePaul got fired in January, a little bit later in the season than Larinaga quit or retired at Miami. But it's that same sense that both of these guys played under 2 different coaches, played in chaotic situations like that. So, and Fisher had a good bounce back at Pacific coming off of that bad season. So there is something to be said about what Staton-McCray could do on a bounce back from that Miami situation.
Your opinion right off the bat, is he a starter? Do you see him as a starter and logging starter minutes?
Yes. I think that in terms of, because again, he, as you mentioned, and I didn't hit upon, Staton-McCray has a two-way. Staton-McCray can play both ends of the court. One interesting stat about Staton-McCray is that he's always averaged at least 1 steal a game throughout his entire college career, not only at Stanford, but even last season at Miami. So getting turnovers and getting easy transition points is something that Shaheen Holloway emphasizes, be it at St. Peter's or at Seton Hall. So I think that the fact that he's got defensive chops will enable him to stay on the court more often than maybe a different player who doesn't have that defensive ability might have. Now, the question is, again, as we've talked about before, Seton Hall has that pool of wings and shooting guards between Staton-McCray, Fisher, TJ Simpkins, Jacob Darby mentioned, and Deshaun Felton. So you've got a pool of these guys who are going to play the 2, going to play the 3, and probably in Fisher and Dar's case, play a little bit of the 4. So it gives Holloway a lot of flexibility, and he can sort of pick and choose which guys he thinks are a better matchup against certain guards. He can pick and choose, let's say, for example, a guy like Staton-McCray is going to be leaned upon as much for his shooting as much as anything else. So that if you need to hit some 3-pointers, Staton-McCray is going to see some time. Whereas if you're looking for somebody who might be a little more athletic, then you might lean towards seeing more of TJ Simpkins and Elijah Fisher on the court or Deshaun Felton at various times. So it gives Holloway the type of flexibility he didn't have last season. Of course, that was also in part because of injuries. He saw guys like Garway Dual go down. He saw Scotty Middleton have his issues, and then of course Chauncey Jenkins going down might have been the nail in the coffin of the Seton Hall season, because he and Coleman were the only consistent double digits. Yeah, and he also had Dylan Adewusu miss a bunch of games. So hopefully this team stays healthy, which gives Holloway that depth with that pool of shooting guards and small forwards that we've talked about, which gives him some matchup flexibility.
So if you had to power rank all of the transfers, where does he list? Because obviously the whole team's new outside of Godswill and Felton. And his name is escaping me right now, Membe. But
I would probably put him obviously we're putting him behind Bud Clark. I would put him behind TJ Simpkins, who I think has the potential to be a really good player. And I think Seton Hall fans, we haven't done an episode on Simpkins yet. But I think he's someone who definitely people need to keep an eye on in terms of his potential to grow, because he took such a leap his freshman season at Elon. Then I'd probably put Elijah Fisher third, if only because, we've seen Fisher score in double digits at a power conference, and the rest of Fisher's numbers are slightly better than Staton-McCray's numbers. I think I would put Staton-McCray fourth in the list in terms of the transfers. And I think that's going to reflect on, what's going to happen when you see the rotation come up as we get towards late October and early November.
So I'm guessing outside of God's will, that was your starting lineup, those first 4, huh? If you had to pick it right now, without seeing practice, without seeing how he's fitting in with the system, that's based off of talent and scouting reports, that's what you choose?
That's probably the direction that's probably my instinct as to what direction Holloway might go in this situation. Of course, then the question becomes, I think the wild card there is Felton, because I do think that you do see a lot of players who play their second season under Holloway take a jump. Yep. So that's something to keep an eye on with Felton, because he's got his second year in the system. He's somebody that Holloway has had a lot of trust in. Had a lot of trust in him when he recruited him down in Charlotte a couple of years ago. So he's sort of been one of Holloway's guys for maybe the longest period of time here. So in that sense, Felton has Felton's advantage over the other guys in that pool is that he's been in the system now for a whole year. So that might give Holloway a little more confidence in Felton. But again, but then again, Staton-McCray I think, has better scoring ability than Felton at this stage. Anything could happen between now and the early November, or even when we get the Big East play.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to pencil a lineup in right now, I think it would be Clark, Simpkins, Staton-McCray, Fisher, and Aaron Aronay.
I just want to publicly say, I think this is the most pro Felton podcast in the world. Because when you first came on, you started talking to him, and I was like, man, I don't know. And then I started looking into him, and I think he's perfect fit. And like you said, his second season with Shaw, and the fact that he's got that bond with him, I think his role will be very important this year. I don't know if he starts, but we're very pro Felton here on Pirate Vibes.
I don't think we've been anti anybody. If we, I know you did.
We haven't. I guess
Patrick Samaric, if I remember correctly. But then again, it's funny that we did that discussion of Samaric just as an aside right before Najee Hines signed the dotted line and shook the front court up altogether.
Yeah, definitely. I'm still pro Jacob Dar, obviously, probably more than you are. So. And Simpkins is great, but I love this pickup with Staton-McCray. Going back to AJ, I think he fits. I think his second season in a Power 5. I think Shaw. I know the whole team is different, but I think Shaw's got a better culture than what was going on in Miami last year. Right? They've changed it all. Heck, the new coach doesn't leave the state of Florida until like the ACC schedule, I believe. Like he doesn't just leave the state of Florida. So they've got some things going on. I think this is a little bit more stable situation, honestly, which is crazy to say out loud after a disastrous season last year. But I think Staton-McCray will fit in well, and with a ball dominant point guard, I think that will help his game the most. I can't even recall Miami's point guard right now, but from last year, it obviously
was it Matt Cleveland.
It maybe.
Is he a point guard? I don't. Again, I think I tuned out Miami. When Larinaga left. Yeah. But I know Matthew Cleveland was their leading scorer last season. I'm not exactly sure he played the point or not. I think it's just the whole idea here is, look, one final point about Staton-McCray is that, the other thing which you have to be cautionary about, and we hinted upon this earlier, is he the type of guy who can find his way outside of Bucky McMillan's system?
Yeah.
Is he just a guy who is really good because he was playing for Bucky McMillan
in the Southern Conference?
Well, right, but the point is that there are certain players who, when they get out of the system that they functioned well in, that some guys' games don't translate. And unfortunately, the only example we have of Staton-McCray outside of McMillan's system is this sort of off season he had at Miami. So that would be the cautionary tale, is that, are you getting a guy who do you think he fits here because of his own skill set, or does he fit here because you hope that what he showed at Samford will translate to Seton Hall's lineup this season?
Yeah, and I think he also, a big thing is his age, right? He comes in, he's more mature than a lot of the kids that are transferring. Like he's ready just to win. Obviously, I had the birth date on my notes, and obviously my computer is giving me struggle today. So I think he's 24, 25, 24.
Look at his bio for a second here. It doesn't give me the ESPN's app doesn't give me his age. I mean, you have to assume that he's in the 24, 25 range, I think. So the one other positive that Staton-McCray has that very few guys in this roster have is NCAA tournament experience. Simpkins doesn't have it. Clark doesn't have it.
Yep.
Dar doesn't have it. Nobody else on this roster has been to an NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for the guy who's done the most winning on this roster, it's AJ Staton-McCray.
That's a great point, and it's crazy because he comes over from a team that only won 11 games last year. But all right, Patrick, we did another one. Maybe we'll dive into Simpkins because the kid from the Bronx, right? He's from the Bronx originally.
AJ Simpkins.
Yeah, he's a New York kid. I know that. With his twin brother, but maybe we could dive into that. Because if you put him as the number 2 guy, then we got to talk about him. I didn't have him high enough. If you put him as the number 2, we got to talk about him. So we got to do an episode on Simpkins before the season. And go check out Patrick's written work, the Big East blog. I real quick, you killed the Pirate. I just want to let you know. I was expecting the Pirate. I was like, this is going to be his homer article. I guess you're like fair and balanced, right? I guess the Big East blog is fair and balanced because you killed the Pirate.
I don't know.
And why pick UConn? Come on, man. They win everything.
That's let me say this about the Pirate for a second. If you've ever been to a game, he does all the mascot stuff well.
Yeah.
Problem is, I get that our colors are blue and white. I get it. But that guy doesn't look anything. That guy looks the least like a Pirate. You want to talk, it's sort of, it's funny we talk about Friar Dom of Providence.
Yeah.
It's a comparison about how even though he's supposed to be a priest and sort of a friendly guy, he's so menacing. He's someone, there are jokes galore. A lot of people compare Friar Dom to the Grim Reaper. Then you flip over to the Pirate, and the Pirate just looks like some happy-go-lucky guy. He doesn't, whereas what I mentioned in the article was that I think it was before I came to Seton Hall, or right about that time, 35 years ago, they used to put a guy in a vest. They put a hat. They gave him a mustache. They gave him a sword, and he walked around swashbuckling the way. Now, again, how much of a tan can you get living in New Jersey in the middle of the winter? Another story. But in terms of menacing, the Pirate from years ago looked more intimidating and looked more aggressive than the guy who shows up. Again, he does a fine enough job. It is what it is. I think that the idea was that they wanted him to look like the colors. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate into a good-looking Pirate, which is why I had Seton Hall, why I had the Pirate as the 9th-looking mascot. I'm not the only one who's complained about how that Pirate just doesn't look the part. I don't know if there's anything really anybody can do. I mean, I guess people always modify these mascots, and maybe when we come out in November, we'll see someone who looks differently. I know that the Pirate just appeared. I think he appeared in a couple of videos going to Mets games, New York Mets games, and he didn't look that much different. That might be an old costume. Who knows? We'll have to see what happens going forward as to whether or not they make adjustments as to what the presentation of the team looks like going forward.
Definitely. Real quick story. I went to a minor league baseball game down in Florida, and they had all the mascots. It was the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, and they had all the mascots. They had Billy the Marlin. They had all of the state of Florida mascots, basically. I just want to let you know, whoever does Jackson DeVille, the Jaguar mascot, is so good, first of all, being a mascot, but also doing the craziest stuff. And maybe we see the Pirate one day do a little crazy stuff, like maybe dive from the top of the rock. Like, because Jacksonville comes in off of what's it called? I can't even think of it. Like you go through the jungles. I can't believe we went off of this tangent, but a zip line. He zip lines all the way across the Jaguar Stadium, and it drops into the pool and everything. And I'm like, man, that's kind of cool for the mascot, but maybe it might not look intimidating. But if he could be a bigger character, maybe you'll love him more.
I don't think it's. I mean, mascots do a mascot. I mean, one thing that separates Jonathan the Husky is that he gets whoever's in that costume gets a little more involved in the action than some of the other mascots do. Now it used to be. I'm old enough to remember when both teams would bring a mascot to the game.
Yeah.
And the mascots would sort of face off. I mean, this happens in the NCAA tournament as well, but I think it's the matter of the presence that Jonathan has and the fact that if any mascot personifies not only the team, but the culture of Connecticut basketball, Jonathan ranks that. That's why Jonathan came in first, because if you said, show me a Husky, and then you put Jonathan out there, he's not as good as Huskies were 20 or 30 years ago. But, that's something, maybe instead of, maybe that's a topic for the Big East Energy. Maybe the Big East Energy can do an episode on mascots. And, I can give my explanation of the history of some of the Big East mascots.
I think we're pro enough on here. Like we are pro Felton here on this podcast. The Big East Energy Network is very pro UConn and Creighton, so we don't need any more publicity about how great their mascot is, better than everyone else. I think we all can agree on that.
Yeah, okay. We'll go with that.
All right. This has been Pirate Vibes. Patrick Madden, Brian Webster. Stay blue, stay true, and vibe on.
Ahoy there! Ahoy, me hearties!